Hello guys, I'm Super Ron. Welcome back to the channel, and we are back at Auto Shack on the Nagaro Blue C5 RS6. You saw in the last episode, we had to rip out its heart and take the engine and box out. In this episode, we're going to be stripping it down further. We've got blown exhaust manifolds, we've got oil leaks, we've got cam belts and servicing to do, and to see what other surprises pop up from previous workmanship. So as you can see, these are a jam-packed complex assembly. Everything is just snaked around to fit in where it can. You've got the exhaust manifolds that come up into the top of the turbos, out the turbine housing, down to the exhausts. But let's have a look for what we actually bought it out here for. And I think it's quite clear there. You can see the exhaust manifold blowing on that corner. You can see all the black soot. There's a bit of a mismatch of bolts as well. Some copper, some standard, some rounded. So we'll get the exhaust manifolds off. Unfortunately, the people that rebuilt the gearbox weren't familiar with RS6s and took it all apart incorrectly, unplugged everything, didn't know where anything went. So they're just putting plugs all together. The main problem was they connected this side lambda sensors up to that side plugs. So when the ECU was trying to adjust the fueling on that side, it was then reading the lambdas this side, which was connected to this bank. So it thought this bank was running rich, and it was just in a whole load of mess. Also lots of plugs on the top for like the carbon canister and the NOx sensors were all plugged in, all the wrong side. Everything was just incorrectly plugged. So we got all that done, and it has been up and running for a little while, and the gearbox is superb. Driving this one compared to mine, the gear changes are so much more tighter. As you pull away, the torque converter comes up on pressure so much quicker than mine. I am a little bit envious of this. In fact, I'm a little bit jealous of the whole car. The other thing that came up in the last episode, in the comments and on a couple of Facebook posts, was the colour. I introduced it as Nagaro Blue RS6. Nagaro Blue isn't usually found in the C5s, and it definitely isn't one of the RS6 colours. A couple of people said about Sprint Blue, the C5 RS6 Pluses were in the Sprint Blue, but we have had a Nagaro Blue S4 in, and I'm pretty sure it's this colour. I have seen a Sprint Blue one, and it's quite a bit lighter. So the easiest way to wrap this up is go and check the sticker in the boot. So that's what I did, and the sticker was blank. Where the paint code should be was blank. So I phoned up TPS, because we often get colour codes from them, and they looked at their database, and under colour code, it was blank. It said a special palette. So the guy at TPS said this was a special order car. It's this colour inside and out, underneath, inside, all under the interior. So it has sprayed this colour from the factory. It's registered in this country in April 2003. So most probably the production started in 2002. So this was very early in the RS6 production, and someone ordered this one in a custom palette. So they would have had to stop the production line, get this one in, paint it its one colour, and then take that out and carry on the production of the rest of the RS6s. So that makes this car even more special. But that doesn't solve the problem of what colour it actually is. I'm pretty sure it is Nagaro Blue, but without a colour code, who knows? But also, ever since the gearbox has been fitted, the exhaust manifolds have been blowing, because of course you have to take all the turbos and everything off to even get to the bell housing to separate the gearbox. So it's finally time to bite the bullet and pull the lump out. But luckily, following all the procedures, knowing what to unplug, what not to unplug, what point to separate pipes, it all came out really nice and easy. So now let's start diving a little bit deeper. I'm going to take all the covers off the front, check out the cam belt, and then we'll start taking this loom off, because it's all routed in the wrong place and plugs are tight and things are rubbing on the engine covers. So all of this has got to come off as well. Exhaust manifolds off, turbos off, downpipes off. Let's start getting a bit deeper. And already, luckily, what I'm finding is, because this has been out recently, all the bolts, even exhaust ones that wouldn't normally come off, are coming off quite easily. So far that is working in my favour. And there are the twin turb skis. So you can see the little turbines in there. They're internally gated, but it all looks good in there. I just had a little feel and everything's nice and tight. No play in the shaft, doesn't look very oily. So I was just having a little look around, checking them. And then my hand went over and I knocked the penny washer, and it's not actually seating. So this turbo hasn't been running full boost, whether the valves come off, whether it's just the penny valve, or whether the actuator's seized. But this one has never been running full boost, because the exhaust gases come through, bypass the turbine and leak through here. So that's quite funny, but the turbos themselves seem really healthy. If we look at this side, see the valve is pulled shut, so all the exhaust gases have to go through the turbine to create boost. And then when the map sensor sees its targeted boost, the boost controller here opens the actuator, which opens this valve so all the exhaust gases bypass out there. On this side, that's been bypassing all the time. And the annoying thing is, I have driven this car quite a bit and it is way faster than mine. So with the remap and all the other mods and the Miltech exhaust and the sports cats and the blow-off valves, the wastegate has always been slightly open, so it hasn't been achieving full boost, but it's still way quicker than standard. So we were contemplating sending these turbos away anyway to get checked out. So I think we are going to do that. I don't think there's any need to go hybrids or bigger, because if you start pushing too much power on these, you're just going to blow up the gearbox again. Not something we really want to do. So I'll drop these turbos off. We normally send our stuff to Essex Turbos and they do all our refurb. So I reckon we'll give them a call, see if they can handle the twin turbos and see what's involved in that. And around the front, I've just popped all the cam belt covers off. And like we peered through, it has got a genuine Audi belt on, but whoever did it used the Tipex marks, which you can't do on these because they're floating pulleys. You need to use the locking tool to do the cam belt, but these lined them up with the Tipex marks, which is incorrect. It's also had a new water pump, but as you can see in there, it has been leaking quite a bit. So we'll order a new one of them and do a full cam belt kit on it. Also looks like the front main oil seal is leaking quite a bit. So we'll do that as the cam belt is off. And I know from previous experiences, the thermostat is behind there. And on my S6, that started leaking. And you have to take everything off to get to it. So I think we'll put the thermostat on as well. The other leak that I saw was down here. We've got some coolant patches there and up here. And that is from this massive block here is actually the oil cooler housing. So that has O-rings between the block and this mount. And this is all full of coolant. So it's just tiny little O-rings. But this is part of the engine mount. This is the alternator mount. This is the oil cooler. This is the coolant takeoff for the turbos, the oil pressure, and the oil filter housing and the oil cooler lines all in one block. So I know you can get a little gasket kit for this, so we'll get this off while we're here. Again, otherwise that is engine out to do it. Looking underneath, we need the exhaust gaskets, so we'll get all them sorted. But I also know from previous experience, as you've seen on the channel for this, Audi discontinued a lot of these parts many years ago. They discontinued oil filters, spark plugs, air filters. You can't get any service parts from Audi for these anymore. So I'm a little bit worried when we're going to be starting looking at exhaust gaskets, gaskets for the side, cam belt kits, what is still available. So that's going to be my next job, put together a little shopping list and see what we can even get. Our poor little engine hoist here is outstretched at its 250 kilo mark, but I'd pretty much say this is more than 250 kilos. So I'm going to set this down on some axle stands, just lifted the car up in the air, so we've got a nice work area here. And on. That'll make it a bit easier. And still bagging everything as we go. Everything we've done so far has been bagged and labelled, so we're fully organised and we'll know how it goes back together. Because sometimes with these jobs, there's no telling how long they can stay apart. It could be a week, it could be a month, it could be 6 months, all depending on parts or how deep we get involved. But I am organised. Downpipes. And I also write on there 1, 2, 3, 4, in what order they come off. So then when I put them back together, I'll just work backwards through my bags. So there we are down on the stands. I've just gone off all the engine mount points, so I know they're structured enough. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. Out and ready to be worked on. So first off, I'm going to tighten this up. There's a little blanking plug on the side. Now, I'm not sure where they are on these because I'm sure on my S6, normally aspirated, it was in there somewhere. So let's fire up the laptop and get the instructions. Because as we know, knowledge is power. So we'll be using Elsa Win again for all our information. This runs us through every step-by-step for the whole procedure, like we saw in the last episode for removing the engine. It also goes as far in as showing me everything how to service it as well. And like I said before, if you want to get Elsa Win or the manuals for any other car, check out eManual online. I'll put the link down in the description. And if you use code RON22, you'll get 22% off. So let's look at this procedure. So for removing tooth belt, here are all our specialist tools again. Going down. Luckily we're quite far ahead because we've got all our front end off already. We've got everything timed up. It says remove anti-roll bar, don't need that. Remove the trims, remove the boost pipe, and then get to that blank. So it does say you can do it with the turbos on. Insert that in there. Right, so that's good to know. So we are somewhere up there. So now we are seated. First thing, I want to get these turbos off so we can get them sent away and we can find out what's actually wrong with the exhaust manifolds while they're blowing. So it looks like you can't actually get to the banjos under here to remove them. And you've got the oil line return under there. Let's go back to elsewhere. So if we look at removing and installing turbocharger left side. Step 1, remove engine. Check. We go down, it says specialist tools is a super sucker. Remove downpipe, done that. Remove dipstick, remove oil drain, and then it says unbolt the manifold with the turbo still attached. So remove manifold and the turbo's left in situ. Then you can get to all the banjos, undo them, and you can get it off. See if the right is the same. Step 1, remove engine. Same again, downpipe, oil return, remove manifold, and then you can get to your connections. So that's what we'll do. And twin turb skis are all off. So turbos are off, manifolds are all off, boost pipes are all off. And now we're left with just having a normally aspirated S6. So I've got the manifolds off and no sign of any blow whatsoever. But when we turned over the manifold, looking down into the ports, when we get to the end one, we can see a massive crack around there. So that is where it's actually leaking out of, not between the head and the manifold, but out of the crack there. So you can see it is quite extreme, and that's where the tin work meets the flange. So it's cracked all the way around there. So what we're going to try and do is get that welded up. But that is where the blow is coming from. And then when we look on the other side, you can see it's chuffing through there, exactly the same place on that join. You can see on that one, it's all sealed. This one is chuffing out. It's not quite such an obvious crack in this one, just down at the bottom. So there is our issues. We've actually got 2 cracked manifolds. We know a good fabrication guy, so we're going to send it over to him. He's going to have a look at what metals are actually made of and probably tig it all back together. So all is not lost. Oh, just in on this one. You can see there, crack around the edge on this one. So it's the 2 back cylinders. So it was actually blowing quite a bit from both sides. So maybe we can't blame the gearbox guys completely for the blowing manifolds. So you can see how tucked the turbos were in. They sit right above the front diff there with all the holes and pipes going to it. So we've got all them disconnected. And the head itself looks absolutely fine. Just oily up this end from that rocker cover leak. So I carried on around the front. Got all the pulleys off. I took the plugs and the coil packs out. So now we've got all exposed at the front because I wanted to track down where this coolant leak was from. And I did have a good suspicion from past experience. So it might not be super clear on here, but that alternator mount, engine mount, oil cooler takeoff, oil filter housing, turbo water return, and oil pressure switch is all in one massive alley block. And if we sneak through here, you can just see in there is an oil cooler as well. Let's see if we can find an exploded diagram of this. So here's the exploded diagram. Knowledge is power. So this is this massive aluminium block which holds the alternator, the engine mount, the oil filter housing, the oil cooler lines, the oil pressure switch, and the oil cooler inside it. And what it has is these 2 little plastic tubes here. They're only about that long, got an O-ring each end, and that connects a waterway in the block to the cooler. Now what happens over time, these crack and perish and leak, but because it's the engine mount as well, you have to disassemble the whole car to get it out or remove the engine. And if we peep through the hole, if you can see in there, that is that pipe, and that's where it's leaking from. So on my S6, I didn't remove the engine, I removed the subframe, removed the engine mount, and took it all out from the bottom. Now, lucky for us, the engine is already out, so we can unbolt this off. But what I've just noticed, someone has been here before because this bolt is rounded off. So someone has already had this assembly off, most likely to do this job in the past. But yeah, thanks for that. So those 2 little pipes aren't a lot of money. I got mine from Audi at the time. It's just a massive job to get to them. They are buried. I know some people like ECS do aluminium upgrades for them, which could work, but the plastic ones do work just fine. So another thing to add to the list. When I took all the spark plugs out, I did notice people have been here before because there were some bolts missing from there. But these are a nightmare to get to in the car. But at least now we can get to all the back. The other problem is these secondary air injection diaphragms overlap ever so slightly. So what you have to do is sneak around the back and get onto these ones and just loosen them enough just to tilt that back a bit. But if you take them out all the way, because the bulkhead is here, you've got no chance of getting to them ever again. But as we're out, it's going to make it a lot easier. So we can get everything out of the way. The gaskets have obviously been done before, but because it's just a bit awkward to slot it all in, they don't last for that long. But as we've got all the space in the world, we'll be able to get a nice neat seal, and then we won't have to worry about that leaking again. Taking these off, quite obviously the cam seals are leaking. It's all wet around there. And the main front crank seal is leaking, but we're having the belt off, so it's not going to be too much job to do all that. The thermostat is in here, so I've ordered one of them because that is behind the cam belt, so that is as deep as you can get almost. But apart from the odd leak, haven't really found any horror stories. And I have found the bung for the crank locking tool to go in. It's that one there. So it probably was just about doable with the turbo in. A lot easy on the normally aspirated ones. But as you can see from that, they definitely didn't use it. And that's why they got their Tipex out. But we have got the correct tool for the job. Another thing I've just noticed, which is clearer now. Remember in the first episode where we drained the coolant and it actually had a block coolant drain, so you could completely empty the block. So when you take the water pump out, it's not going to spew out everywhere. And what that is just a blank on the bottom that goes up to a banjo in the side of the block. So I've not seen anything like that before. That's a handy little addition, and that just allows you to drain all the water out lower than the water pump level, so you don't make a mess down here as you take the water pump out. Good idea, Aldi. Another problem when you're doing the rocker cover gasket this side is you've got this hard water pipe here. That does bolt on there, and what you tend to do is just unbolt the bracket that's under there and just bend this out the way a bit while you're putting the rocker cover on and off. As you can see, it's got a complete overlap. But as we've got access, we might as well take that pipe off and do a proper job. We'll get all these out the way as well. All the looms just go up. We can take this off properly, get that out the way. Another question we've been debating on this is whether to do the cam chains or not. As you can see, the cam belt just runs the exhaust cams, and then the exhaust cams have a chain to go to the inlet cams each side, and they've got a VVT just like the 1.8 turbos. These are pretty much two 1.8 turbo heads flipped round side by side, but I had to do these on mine, and at the time each tensioner was about £600 each. So it's not one of them things you just do just for the sake of it while the engine's out. You can do it in the engine bay. You do have to take the cam belt off to do this side, but that side you could do in situ. In fact, I actually did that side in my driveway on mine. But I just looked up the latest price of them from Aldi, and they are now discontinued. They sold the last ones, and at the last price they were going for £740 each plus the VAT. So with that, and the chains were about £100 each. Parts to do the chain and tensioners were £2,200, which is absolutely crazy. Lucky on this, they are absolutely silent. We checked the cam phase side by side on the VCDS and it was perfect. So these tensioners are fine. I'm not sure whether they've been done in the past or not. They are genuine tensioners on there, but something for the future, you can no longer get the tensioners. Not sure that you'd really want to at £2,200. And my other concern when stripping down was the intercooler. On the driver's side, this thing was really oily at the bottom. So I suspect that it is leaking. So we've got our trusty smoke tester out. So we're going to blank one end off, put the smoke tester in the other end and see if we get any seeping out. And then make the decision whether it's repairable, replaceable or upgradable. So this is just like a supersonic vape. So we'll put this in one end, build up some pressure. Oh yeah, we are definitely leaking. So I don't think the core's burst. I think it's where the core meets the end tanks. So that is a confirmed leak. And it's leaking out of both ends actually. The core is now, I can't see any cracks or anything, but definitely leaking. So we had one turbo not boosting properly because the wastegate was open, and the other turbo was boosting properly, but it's losing half its boost out the intercooler. Yeah, definitely chuffing out of there. I've just piped it up to the other intercooler that's still on the car. I don't know if you can see there. We are leaking and it's coming from the same place down at the bottom. It's not cracked on the weld. It's where the core is actually clamped into its base. It's just leaking out of there. So they both have got a little weep. But the other one is definitely a lot worse. I've just got the vacuum gauge out so we can simulate boosts on the actuator. to see if they are free and working. So as the boost comes in at a certain PSI, that should open the wastegate. So let's see if they move. So if we put pressure to the actuator, the wastegate should open. There we go, 5 PSI. Fully open at about 11. So that one is working fine. Happy with that. This is the one that is stuck. So let's see if this moves. Give it some boost. So that's 5. That's when the other one started to open. 6. Starting to move at 8. That's open, and then that should close. So I don't know whether the problem is the actuator seized or the pivot seized, not letting it go back. I can unbolt it there and pull it to see if that seals it, and that'll mean the actuator seized, but I kind of suspect that it is going to be this arm. So I'm just going to try and unbolt this actuator, see if it's the actuator that's seized and not allowing it to go back, or whether it's a problem in the spindle. So if I can pull this back and it'll go, then it'll be the actuator. That's the actuator released. So by pulling that, I can get that to seat in its seat and not spin or be loose. But it is tight back there. I think the problem is in this spindle in here, because when the actuator is on its pegs, that is under tension and that is pulling it that way. I think the pivot in here has seized up, because as that pulls in an arc, obviously that should straighten out that way, because when you pull it down there, that does come true. I think that's seized up there. And that's in there, that's tight, but because it's at the wrong angle, that can't pull it any further. And this is loose. So I think the problem with this side is the pivots in here has seized. So that will all be taken care of with a rebuild. I've just spoken to Essex Turbos, who do all our turbo rebuilds. We send them all the way to them. They're nice and local and always provided us a really good service. And they came back at just over £400 a turbo for a full refresh. And with a year's warranty as well, I think that is what we're going to do. So we'll send these away, they'll get fully refurbished, and then they'll be good to go straight back on. I've also got all the pulleys and the idlers off, and the bearings in these are all shot. You can hear them in the tensioner as well. So we'll put all them on the list. And what I said in the last episode, I was a little bit worried on how much we were actually going to be able to get for this, because they discontinued a lot of service parts many years ago. You can't get oil filters, air filters, spark plugs. You can't get any serviceable items for these now. But I've made a list, phoned up TPS, and pretty much everything is still available. Exhaust manifold gaskets, all the nuts and bolts for the exhaust manifold. You can get the cam belt kit, water pump, thermostat, rocker covers, rear cam bungs, O-rings between the oil filters, auxiliary belt, cam seals, airflow meter plugs, front main oil seal, bolts, all the bits. And most of them weren't horrendous money. Just for example, exhaust manifold gaskets, £13 each, direct from Audi. So can't really grumble at that. The exhaust manifold nuts were a bit of a surprise. There's 20 small little nuts and then 4 long studs. The little nuts are only £1 or so each, not too bad. The long nuts, there's 4 of them and they're £18 each. But we've got to renew them, so they're on the list as well. So I'll get all this ordered from TPS. So by the time I've got it all stripped out, we should be ready to roll. I think we can wrap this episode up here. The manifolds are going to go off to our friendly local fabricator who makes all our stainless steel exhaust systems. He's going to weld up them back to the flange and that'll be done. Our turbos have just been sent off to Essex Turbos. They said they can refurb them, no problem. So they'll be coming back looking good as new. And as soon as the manifolds and turbos are back, we can put this back in the car. I hope you've enjoyed this one. diving into the often unseen parts of an RS6. I've been really surprised how many parts we can still get, considering all the basic services stuff are no longer available. I was really pleased we can nearly do it top to bottom in genuine parts. So make sure you give this video a like. Be sure to tune in next week where we'll be carrying on with this. But until then, make sure you have fun.